Every single year, somebody plants a hydrangea, does everything right, waters it, feeds it, gives it a decent spot in the yard, and by midsummer they are standing there staring at a wall of green leaves wondering where the flowers went. No blooms. Not one. Just a perfectly healthy-looking plant that apparently decided flowering was optional. And the worst part is not the missing flowers. The worst part is not knowing why. I have been growing hydrangeas for a long time. Across different zones, different soil types, different climates. And the one thing I can tell you with complete confidence is this. When a hydrangea refuses to perform, there is always a reason. Always. These plants are not mysterious. They are not stubborn. They just have specific needs, and when those needs are not met, they show you exactly how they feel about it. What I want to do today is walk you through 7 planting mistakes that quietly destroy hydrangea performance across America every single season. Some of these happen before the plant ever goes in the ground. A couple of them happen years later, and the gardener never connects the dots. And one of them, which we will get to toward the end, affects more gardeners in the South and Southwest than almost anywhere else, and almost nobody talks about it. So drop your state or your USDA hardiness zone in the comments right now. Zones 4 through 9 all have hydrangea varieties that can absolutely thrive, but what goes wrong in Zone 5 in Ohio looks different from what goes wrong in Zone 8 in Georgia. Knowing where you are gardening helps make this more useful for you specifically. Mistake number 1. Buying a hydrangea without knowing what kind it actually is. This sounds basic, maybe even obvious. But walk through any garden center in April and watch what happens. People pick a hydrangea off the bench because the blooms are beautiful, the color is perfect, maybe the price is right, and they bring it home and plant it the same way they would plant a rose or a salvia or anything else. Same hole, same depth, same spot in the yard. And that is where the trouble starts. There are 5 main types of hydrangeas that most American gardeners are working with, and they do not all behave the same way. Not even close. The care that keeps one type thriving will leave another one struggling. And if you do not know which plant you actually have, you are essentially guessing at everything that comes after. The big leaf hydrangea, Hydrangea macrophylla, is probably the one most people picture when they think of hydrangeas. Large round flower heads, deep green leaves, comes in pink and blue and purple. Varieties like Endless Summer, Nico Blue, Blushing Bride. These are beautiful plants. They are also the most demanding of the group. They want morning sun and afternoon shade. They need consistent moisture. They are sensitive to late frost, and they are the ones most commonly planted in completely the wrong spot. Hardy in zones 5 through 9, though in zone 5 they need some winter protection. The panicle hydrangea. Hydrangea paniculata is on the opposite end of the spectrum. This is the tough one. Full sun tolerant. More drought resistant once established than any other type on this list. Varieties like Limelight, Little Lime, and Bobo are some of the most reliable flowering shrubs you can put in an American yard. Hardy all the way from zone 3 down to zone 8. If you are in Minnesota or Wisconsin and you want hydrangeas that actually survive the winter without babying, this is the group to look at. Smooth hydrangeas, Hydrangea arborescens, are the ones you know as Annabelle or Incredible. Big, almost comically large white flower heads on relatively compact plants. These are very forgiving, tolerate more shade than most people expect, and are hardy from zone 3 through zone 9. They bloom on new growth every season, which means pruning rules for this type are completely different from the big leaf varieties. Oakleaf hydrangeas, Hydrangea corsifolia, are native to the American South and genuinely underused. They handle heat. They handle drought once they are established. Their fall foliage is spectacular, and varieties like Snowflake and Alice produce long, elegant flower clusters rather than the traditional round mophead shape. Hardy in zones 5 through 9, and particularly well suited to the southeast. And then there are mountain hydrangeas, Hydrangea serrata. Smaller and more compact than the big leaf types, slightly hardier, with more delicate lacecap-style flowers. Tough Stuff and Tough Stuff Red are the varieties you will most commonly find at garden centers. Hardy in zones 6 through 9. The reason knowing your variety matters so much is that every decision you make after buying the plant, where to put it, how deep to plant it, how much water it needs, and especially when to prune it, depends on which type you are working with. That last one is critical. Pruning the wrong type at the wrong time is the single most common reason hydrangeas stop blooming entirely. We are going to spend real time on that later because it deserves it. For right now, If you are not sure what variety you have growing in your yard, the tag that came with the plant is a starting point. If that is long gone, a clear photo of the flower and the leaf shape posted to a gardening group or run through a Plant ID app will get you an answer in minutes. Do not skip this step. Everything else builds on it. If this is the kind of content that actually helps you, practical, specific, no fluff, subscribing is the best way to make sure you keep seeing it. New videos go up every week. Mistake number 2. Planting in the wrong location. This one is painful because by the time most people realize they have done it, the plant has already been in the ground for a full season. Sometimes 2. Moving an established hydrangea is hard work, and in some cases the root disturbance sets the plant back another full year. So getting the location right before you dig that hole is worth slowing down for. Most hydrangeas, and when I say most, I mean the big leaf, mountain, and oak leaf types specifically, want what you could describe as a morning sun, afternoon shade situation. Roughly 4 to 6 hours of direct sunlight in the morning, followed by shade or at least filtered light through the hottest part of the day. The morning sun is not optional. A lot of people assume hydrangeas are shade plants because they wilt dramatically in heat, and they plant them somewhere cool and shaded thinking they're doing the plant a favor. What actually happens is the plant grows. The leaves look full and healthy and dark green, and then it produces no flowers. Not because anything is wrong with the soil or the water, but because deep shade prevents the plant from generating the photosynthetic energy that bloom production requires. Flowering is a high-energy process. A plant sitting in heavy shade all day simply does not have the reserves to do it. But too much sun causes a completely different set of problems. Hot afternoon sun, particularly the kind you get in Georgia, Alabama, Texas, the Carolinas, Louisiana, anywhere in zone 7 through 9 with brutal summer heat, will scorch the leaves of a big leaf hydrangea fast. Those large thin leaves have enormous surface area. They lose moisture through transpiration faster than the root system can replace it. And when afternoon sun is hammering them for 4 or 5 hours straight, the plant wilts dramatically even if you watered it that same morning. The leaves brown at the edges, then across the surface, and the plant looks like it is dying. It is not dying, but it is under serious stress, and a plant under serious stress does not bloom the way it should. East-facing planting spots are the sweet spot for big leaf, mountain, and oak leaf varieties. The plant gets full morning light, and the house or a fence or a tree line shades it naturally by early afternoon. If you do not have a true east-facing bed available, look for a spot shaded by a structure or a high-canopied deciduous tree from roughly noon onward. That filtered light through tree branches is often enough. Gardeners in zones 8 and 9. Coastal Texas, Florida, Southern California, the Gulf Coast, should treat afternoon shade as completely non-negotiable for big leaf varieties. Not a nice-to-have. Required. Now, panicle hydrangeas are the exception to almost everything I just said. Limelight, little lime, bobo, firelight. These handle full sun across most American zones without issue. They actually tend to perform better with more light. If you have a hot, sunny spot in the yard and you want hydrangeas there, panicle varieties are the answer. Mistake number 3. Planting at the wrong depth. This one takes about 30 seconds to explain and 2 seconds to get wrong at planting time. When you set a hydrangea in the ground, the top of the root ball should sit approximately 1 inch above the surrounding soil surface. Not flush with it, slightly elevated. The reason matters. Every time it rains and every time you water, soil settles. Water moves downward. If the plant goes in flush with grade, or slightly below it, which happens more than you would think, moisture accumulates right at the base of the stem. That transition zone where the stem meets the root system is called the stem collar, and it is one of the most sensitive areas on the entire plant. Constant moisture sitting against that collar creates anaerobic conditions. No oxygen, continuous dampness, and the kind of environment where root rot pathogens like Phytophthora establish and spread. The damage happens underground first. By the time the plant above ground starts showing symptoms, yellowing leaves, soft stems, general decline, the root system has often already taken serious damage. Plant slightly high. Let the soil settle naturally down around the root ball over the first few weeks. And never, under any circumstances, plant a hydrangea in a low spot or a depression where water pools after rain. Drainage matters as much as depth. Mistake number 4. Wrong soil and container problems. Soil is the foundation of everything. You can do every other thing correctly and still struggle if the soil around the roots is wrong. For in-ground planting, the most common mistake is using native yard soil straight from the ground to backfill the planting hole. Even soil that looks rich and dark and healthy can cause problems when it is packed into a hole around a new root ball. Clay-heavy soils especially, and there is a lot of clay across the American Midwest, Southeast, and Mid-Atlantic, compact around roots and restrict both drainage and oxygen movement. Roots need oxygen just as much as they need water. A compacted, waterlogged planting hole is one of the most oxygen-depleted environments you can put a plant into. The fix is straightforward. Amend the backfill with compost. Not peat alone, not sand alone, compost. A roughly 60 to 40 blend of native soil and quality compost gives you something that drains adequately in clay-heavy ground while still retaining enough moisture in sandier soils. Compost improves structure in both directions simultaneously, which is why it works across such a wide range of American soil types. For container planting, the rules are stricter. Never put native yard soil or straight topsoil into a pot. What happens in a rigid container is completely different from what happens in open ground. In the ground, clay particles are surrounded by an enormous network of air channels, worm tunnels, and organic pathways that keep water and oxygen moving. Put that same soil into a pot, and there is nowhere for those channels to go. The clay compacts, the pore space collapses, drainage essentially stops, and the roots suffocate. Gardeners buy a healthy plant in spring, pot it in yard soil, water it faithfully all summer, and watch it decline steadily toward August without understanding what went wrong. Always use a quality potting mix formulated specifically for container growing. A good container mix has bark fines, perlite, and composted material blended to hold some moisture while draining well and maintaining oxygen in the root zone. That structure is what the roots actually need. Container size matters just as much as soil composition. The minimum for a hydrangea in a pot is 18 to 24 inches in diameter with real depth, not just width. These plants have expansive, fibrous root systems. Crowding them into a pot that is too small produces exactly the same result as planting in the wrong soil: stunted growth, fewer stems, and significantly reduced flowering. And for those of you in colder zones, Zone 4, 5, and 6, if your containers stay outdoors through winter, stay away from unglazed terracotta, clay, and ceramic. These materials absorb moisture into their walls. When temperatures drop below freezing, that moisture expands and the pot cracks. A cracked pot in January exposes the root system that was sitting warmly protected inside to freezing air. Food-grade plastic, fiberglass, or thick-walled resin containers flex slightly in a freeze and hold up through multiple winters without failing. Mistake number 5. Getting the watering wrong in either direction. The name hydrangea comes from Greek words meaning water vessel. There is a reason for that. These are plants that genuinely need consistent moisture. Their large leaves transpire rapidly. Their root systems are not particularly deep, and they do not have the drought tolerance that something like a coneflower or a black-eyed Susan has. A hydrangea that repeatedly wilts to the point of completely collapsed stems and flat, hanging leaves is a plant under serious physiological stress. Each time that happens, the plant burns through stored energy reserves just to survive. Flower bud development requires a surplus of stored energy to initiate. A plant that is constantly pulling from those reserves to stay alive has nothing left over for blooms. You may keep the plant alive through a dry summer, but the following season will be noticeably worse for flowers. That said, and this is where many gardeners overcorrect, overwatering is equally destructive and often faster acting than drought stress. When roots sit in saturated, waterlogged soil for extended periods, gas exchange stops. Root cells die. The damage moves inward from the fine feeder roots toward the main structural roots. And here is the part that trips people up. The symptoms of overwatering above ground look almost identical to drought stress. Wilting, yellowing leaves, general decline. The plant looks thirsty even as it is essentially drowning, because the damaged roots can no longer transport water upward regardless of how much moisture surrounds them. The correct approach is deep, infrequent watering rather than a little water every single day. Push a finger 2 inches into the soil. If it is still moist at that depth, wait. If it is dry, water thoroughly, slowly, at the base of the plant, until water runs freely from the drainage holes. That method encourages roots to reach deeper into the soil profile, where moisture stays more stable, rather than remaining near the surface where it evaporates within a day. Water at the base of the plant every time. Overhead watering with sprinklers keeps foliage wet for hours, and wet foliage is exactly the condition that Cercospora leaf spot and anthracnose need to get started. Cercospora shows up as circular purple-bordered spots on the lower leaves in late summer. Anthracnose is more aggressive, brown blotches with tan centers that spread quickly in cool, damp conditions and can defoliate a plant heading into fall. Both are largely preventable by simply directing water at the soil and not the leaves. Water in the morning. Any incidental splash on the foliage has the full day to dry before nightfall. Gardeners in zones 7 through 9 during July and August. Check soil moisture more often than you think you need to. Surface soil dries fast in that heat and can feel completely dry while the deeper root zone still has adequate moisture. Always check 2 inches down before deciding whether to water. That covers 5 of the 7 mistakes. The final 2 are coming up next, and one of them, the pruning section, is worth every minute of your time if you have ever had a hydrangea that leafed out beautifully in spring and then produced nothing all summer. That answer is coming. Mistake number 6. Feeding your hydrangeas the wrong way. Fertilizer is one of those things that feels straightforward until it is not. The basic logic seems reasonable. More nutrients means stronger growth. Stronger growth means more flowers. But with hydrangeas specifically, that reasoning breaks down fast, and the wrong fertilizer applied at the wrong time will cost you an entire season of blooms without giving you a single obvious clue that it was the cause. The nutrient that causes the most damage is nitrogen. Every fertilizer bag has 3 numbers on the label. Those numbers represent nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in that order. Nitrogen is the first number. It is the nutrient responsible for vegetative growth, stems, leaves, overall plant size. And hydrangeas respond to high nitrogen the same way most plants do. They take off. The growth is fast, lush, and impressively green. Your neighbors might genuinely compliment the plant. But that plant will not bloom. What nitrogen does at high levels is push the plant almost entirely into vegetative mode. All available energy goes toward producing foliage. Flower bud initiation, which requires a specific hormonal shift inside the plant, gets crowded out. The resources are simply not available for it. You end up with a magnificent shrub full of leaves and absolutely nothing else. The fertilizers that cause this most often are not even sold as hydrangea fertilizers. They are lawn fertilizers. High-nitrogen turf products that drift into garden beds during application or get watered across the lawn and carry into the root zones of nearby shrubs. Gardeners who have experienced 2 consecutive bloomless seasons on otherwise healthy plants should look at what has been applied to the lawn nearby. The answer is sometimes right there. Fresh animal manure does the same thing. Composted manure that has broken down fully is generally fine in moderate amounts. Fresh manure applied directly around hydrangeas dumps nitrogen into the root zone at levels the plant cannot balance, and the result is identical to applying a high-nitrogen synthetic fertilizer. What hydrangeas actually need is a balanced, slow-release fertilizer, something in the range of a October 10 formula, or a product formulated specifically for flowering shrubs with moderate nitrogen and appropriate phosphorus and potassium levels. Apply once in early spring as new growth begins pushing out. A second application in early summer is acceptable if the plant looks like it needs a boost. Pale leaves, slow growth, general lack of vigor. Those are legitimate signs that feeding is warranted. Stop completely by midsummer. Fertilizing after that point pushes new soft growth late in the season. That tender new growth cannot harden off properly before the first frost arrives. In zones where fall frosts come early. Zone 4, 5, and 6. Late-season fertilizing can leave fresh growth vulnerable to freeze damage at exactly the time the plant should be preparing for dormancy. Beyond frost damage, late fertilizing also interferes with the plant's natural process of protecting dormant flower buds that are already forming on old wood varieties. Those buds need the plant to slow down and focus inward. Nitrogen tells it to do the opposite. One more thing worth saying here. If you have been fertilizing correctly and your hydrangea still looks pale and unhealthy, test your soil before adding anything else. Nutrient deficiencies in hydrangeas sometimes have nothing to do with what is missing from the soil and everything to do with pH preventing the plant from absorbing what is already there. Soil that is too alkaline will lock out iron even when iron is present, producing yellowed leaves with green veins, a condition called interveinal chlorosis. Adding more fertilizer to that situation makes it worse, not better. Test first. Adjust pH if needed. Then reassess. Mistake number 7. Pruning at the wrong time. This is the one. Of everything on this list, nothing accounts for more bloomless hydrangeas across America than this single mistake. Not soil problems, not watering, not location. Improper pruning. And the reason it keeps happening is not because gardeners are careless. It is because the information needed to prune correctly was never clearly explained to most people in the first place. Everything comes down to one question. Does your hydrangea bloom on old wood or new wood? That is not gardening jargon for its own sake. It describes a real biological process that determines exactly when your plant sets its flower buds, and therefore exactly when you are and are not allowed to cut it back. Old wood means the plant sets its flower buds on stems that grew during the previous season. Those buds form in late summer, sit dormant through fall and winter on the existing canes, and open the following year. New wood means the plant sets its flower buds on the fresh stems it pushes out each spring. No carryover. Fresh buds on fresh growth every single year. The reason this distinction is so important is that the two groups require completely opposite pruning timing. Get them confused and you remove every flower bud the plant spent months developing, without damaging the plant at all, without causing any visible harm, without a single sign that anything went wrong until summer arrives and the blooms never appear. Old wood bloomers. This group includes the varieties most people associate with the word hydrangea. Big leaf types, macrophylla, like Endless Summer, Nico Blue, Blushing Bride, and the Let's Dance series. Oakleaf varieties like Snowflake, Alice, and Ruby Slippers. Mountain hydrangeas like Tough Stuff and Tough Stuff Red. And climbing hydrangeas, Hydrangea anomala. As soon as these plants finish flowering in summer, the process of setting next year's buds begins almost immediately. By August in most parts of the country, earlier in warmer zones, those buds are already forming on the canes that just bloomed. Through fall and winter they sit dormant, protected by the plant's own physiology and ideally by a layer of mulch at the base. Here is where the damage happens. Every autumn across America, a well-intentioned gardener walks outside, looks at the faded brown flower heads on a big leaf hydrangea, and decides to clean things up. Takes the pruning shears to the whole plant, cuts it back hard. Or waits until March, sees some winter dieback on the canes, and removes everything that does not look perfectly green and alive. Both actions accomplish the same thing. Every dormant flower bud already set for the coming year gets removed. The plant leaves out in spring looking completely healthy, grows vigorously all summer, produces nothing. The only window for pruning old wood bloomers is immediately after flowering, July through early August in most American zones. You have roughly 4 to 6 weeks after the flowers fade to do any cutting that needs doing, and then the shears go away until the following summer after the plant blooms again. For deadheading specifically, removing the spent flower heads, trace each faded stem downward until you reach the first healthy pair of buds. They will appear as slightly swollen green nodes on the stem. Cut just above that pair at a 45-degree angle, approximately a 1/4 inch above the buds. Clean cut, no stub, no flush cut against the bud itself. For thinning on established plants 4 years old or older, remove roughly 1/3 of the oldest canes at the base of the plant each year. The oldest canes are easy to identify, gray, bark-like, covered in small side branches. Removing them at the base encourages the plant to push up fresh, vigorous canes that produce larger, better flowers than those exhausted older stems ever will again. A note on the Endless Summer series and other reblooming big leaf varieties. These have been bred to initiate flower buds on both old and new growth. They attempt a second flush on current season stems after the first bloom wave fades. For these specific cultivars, there is somewhat more flexibility. Some careful deadheading and light shaping in early spring is acceptable to encourage that second flush. But the majority of the plant should still be managed according to old wood rules. The reblooming ability is a bonus, not a replacement for understanding the underlying biology. New wood bloomers, panicle hydrangeas, paniculata, and smooth hydrangeas, arborescens, belong here. Limelight, little lime, Bobo, Firelight, Vanilla Strawberry, Annabelle, Incredible. All of them set flower buds on the fresh growth they produce each spring. No dormant buds carrying over on old canes, which means pruning during dormancy, late winter through early spring, February into March. Removes nothing of value. The plant simply grows new stems in spring and loads them with flowers by summer. Smooth hydrangeas like Annabelle and Incredible can be cut back hard. Leave a framework of stems roughly 12 to 18 inches from the ground. That might feel aggressive the first time you do it. The result by midsummer will change your mind. Hard pruning builds a sturdier, more compact woody base that supports those enormous flower heads without the whole plant collapsing sideways in a summer rainstorm. If you have ever watched an Annabelle fold completely flat after a heavy rain, stems splayed out in every direction, that is almost always the result of growth that was too soft and too long from insufficient pruning the previous winter. Panicle hydrangeas are handled differently because they develop a more tree-like branching structure over time. Do not cut these to the ground. Instead, remove roughly 1/3 of the previous year's growth to maintain balanced shape and concentrate energy into vigorous new shoots. Clear out any crossing or crowded stems from the interior of the plant to keep air moving through the center, which reduces fungal pressure through the growing season. Pruning technique, regardless of variety. Every cut should be made at a 45-degree angle. This is not arbitrary preference. An angled cut sheds water away from the cut surface, reducing the time moisture sits against the wound and lowering the chance of fungal entry. Place each cut approximately 1/4 to 1 inch above a healthy bud. Too close and the bud desiccates. Too far and the stub dies back and becomes a point of entry for disease. Use sharp bypass pruners for anything under 3/4 of an inch in diameter. Loppers for thicker stems. Dull blades crush and tear tissue instead of cutting cleanly, leaving ragged wounds that callus slowly and stay vulnerable longer. Wipe the blades with rubbing alcohol between plants. Not between every cut on the same plant, between different plants. Fungal spores and bacterial pathogens transfer easily on metal surfaces. This habit takes 10 seconds and prevents a lot of unnecessary problems. Never apply pruning paint, wound sealant, or wax to cut surfaces. The impulse to protect an open wound is completely understandable. But research on this has been consistent for decades. These products trap moisture against the cut, create favorable conditions for fungal and bacterial organisms, and actively interfere with the plant's natural callousing response. Trees and shrubs seal their own wounds efficiently when left alone. Let them. The bonus, changing your hydrangea's color with soil chemistry. This is real science. Not a trick, not a gimmick. And once you understand the mechanism behind it, the color your hydrangea produces stops feeling random and starts making complete sense. First, the important boundary. This applies only to big leaf hydrangeas, Macrophylla, and mountain hydrangeas, Serrata, the varieties that produce pink, blue, and purple flowers. White flowering varieties like Annabelle, Incredible, and Limelight do not respond to soil chemistry manipulation because they lack the relevant pigments. Everything below is for pink and blue types only. The color in these hydrangeas comes from a group of pigments called anthocyanins. Those pigments interact with aluminum ions in the soil. When the plant's roots absorb aluminum, it binds with the anthocyanins and produces blue flowers. When aluminum is unavailable, either absent from the soil or chemically locked out, those same pigments express pink or red instead. Soil pH controls aluminum availability. In acidic soil, aluminum becomes soluble and the roots can absorb it. In alkaline soil, aluminum becomes insoluble and the roots cannot reach it regardless of how much is physically present. The color of your hydrangea, in other words, is a direct reflection of your soil chemistry. It is the plant telling you something specific about what is happening underground. For blue flowers, target a soil pH between 4.0 and 5.5. Apply aluminum sulfate dissolved in water. Approximately 1 teaspoon per gallon. Water the plant thoroughly first, apply the solution slowly around the root zone, then water again immediately after. Never apply to dry soil. Concentrated aluminum sulfate solution causes osmotic burn on roots when there is no moisture buffer present. Apply during active growth, March through May, when the roots are taking up nutrients most efficiently. Keep the solution off the foliage. For fertilizer, select a formula low in phosphorus. High phosphorus levels in the soil bind with aluminum and prevent root absorption. A ratio around May 25th, 30 works well for maintaining the conditions that support blue pigment expression. Keep blue flowering hydrangeas away from concrete foundations, sidewalks, and block walls. Concrete continuously leaches lime into surrounding soil as it ages, steadily raising the pH in the root zone. You can amend repeatedly and still lose the battle if the concrete is working against you constantly. Distance from any concrete structure is the only reliable solution. For pink flowers, target a soil pH between 6.0 and 7.0. Apply dolomitic lime or hydrated lime, approximately 1 tablespoon dissolved in a gallon of water, around the root zone during spring months. Same technique as above. Water before, apply slowly, water after. Keep it off the leaves. Select a fertilizer with moderate to higher phosphorus content to support the alkaline conditions that prevent aluminum uptake. Do not push the pH above 7. Soil that becomes excessively alkaline prevents the plant from absorbing iron even when iron is present in the soil. The result is interveinal chlorosis. Leaves turn yellow while the veins remain green. The plant is under genuine nutritional stress when that appears, and continuing to raise pH at that point causes more harm. For purple, hold the pH in the middle range, roughly 5.5 to 6.0. Partial aluminum availability at that range produces a blend of both pigment expressions simultaneously. That mix reads as purple. Achieving and maintaining that specific window requires regular soil testing and small incremental adjustments rather than large amendments in either direction. Before adding anything to your soil, aluminum sulfate, lime, any amendment, test your current pH. Basic soil test kits are available at any garden center for a few dollars. Knowing your starting point tells you how far you need to move and how much product to apply. Adding aluminum sulfate to soil that is already strongly acidic or lime to soil that is already alkaline pushes conditions into ranges that stress the plant rather than helping it. Color change is not immediate. Depending on how far your current pH sits from the target, the shift in flower color can take several weeks, a full growing season, or occasionally longer on heavily amended ground. Apply incrementally, test regularly, and give the process time to work. Container growing makes this dramatically easier, particularly for gardeners dealing with naturally alkaline soil or alkaline municipal water, common across the western United States, the Great Plains, and limestone-heavy regions of the Midwest and South. In a container, the growing medium, the water chemistry, and the pH are all within your control. Fine-tuning color in a pot is significantly more precise than trying to alter the chemistry of a large garden bed that may be influenced by surrounding soil, groundwater, and nearby concrete structures simultaneously. Most of the mistakes covered here have one thing in common. They are not the result of bad gardening. They are the result of incomplete information. Nobody explained old wood versus new wood before you made your first pruning cut. Nobody warned about nitrogen and its effect on flowering. Nobody walked through the aluminum chemistry behind the color. That is not your fault. The right information simply was not in front of you. Which of these 7 mistakes hit closest to home for you? If something on this list just explained a problem you have been staring at for a season or two, put it in the comments. Specific situations, specific varieties, specific zones. Every comment gets read, and the questions people ask directly shape what gets covered next. Drop your state or your USDA hardiness zone below as well. This audience stretches from Zone 4 in the upper Midwest to Zone 9 along the Gulf Coast and in Southern California. Knowing where you are gardening makes it possible to build content around the conditions you are actually dealing with. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is a reasonable time. Practical, specific gardening content every week. No products to push. Just real information built around what actually works in American gardens across American zones. Go take care of your hydrangeas. You have everything you need.